Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And oh my goodness, are you in for a treat today? We've got a woman who is a roller skater, chocolate lover, ultimate rock star, former mayor, and former mayor is actually the time when I did meet this gorgeous woman, Jenna Davey Burns. And I've been on her podcast when she was mayoring, and we had so much fun. It's like, oh my God, has it really ended? Have we got to leave it here? So we get to now pick it up again, except the shoe's on the other foot. So this time I get to learn about this incredible human being and where courage has shown up in her life. So before we do get to know a little bit more about you, Jenna, could you just share what excites you to have a conversation with me today about courage?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. And I've been so looking forward to having a chance to catch up with you. You're absolutely right. That conversation we had, was it 5 months ago, back in the studio at Westall, the recording studio at the library, was just incredible. And I was really excited to have another chance to speak with you today. I'll just acknowledge I'm on Bunurong land, and I wanted to pay my respects to elders past and present, and just recognise all Aboriginal people and First Nations people who might be listening to this podcast, and to recognise that we're going through a truth and treaty process here in Victoria. Yeah, I love conversations like this, conversations where I hope I can share something that's inspired me, in the hope it might, I don't know, spark something in someone else, but also to hear from you and things that might excite you as well. I love hearing from women and the stories that they can share, the resilience and the courage. These are things that haven't had enough space, and creating space for women's stories is something I'm really passionate about.
Oh, I know. And that's certainly something that we share our love
Yes.
for. Yeah. And, one of the things, like I said, I met you when you were the mayor, and I just loved it. It must take so much courage to front up every single day with public scrutiny, everyone's eyes on every single thing you do. And yet, I don't think I've ever seen you without bright pink, happy, smiley lips, color and just vibrance. And you've often got like bright pink stripes in your hair. Like, oh, you've got them now, but they're not as bright because we're on the camera. But it was like, this is how you showed up in a world that most of us associate with being very straight laced, very boring, no color, very dull. Excuse anyone who's in politics. But that's kind of been the thing. Anyway, so on that note, and before we get into the gist, could you just share a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I mean, it's really lovely to hear that you noticed that effort that I put into trying to really smash through the stereotypes about what people in politics look like, particularly for women, because we don't have very many sort of molds or ways of understanding women's roles in politics. It's only been in the last really 5 to 10 years that we've seen this surge in women being able to be in the rightful place, which is in a democracy representing their community. It's funny you mentioned courage about showing up as being mayor, actually, because I just wanted to quickly call that out. We talked just before we came online about when you find your purpose. And I think when you've got that strong sense of alignment, it doesn't feel like you have to dig deep every day. It felt really natural. There's other times in my life I've had to really pull on the courage strings and kind of go, right, let's rally together here. But as a mayor in the place that I had, where I felt really good, I had an amazing team around me, I felt like I was on my path. I knew what I was doing. I was representing and serving my community. It felt joyful, and every point of engagement made me feel bigger and better, because I just love being around people. So I wanted to share that insight, because there might be other women thinking, it might be overwhelming to do something like that. And it can be, but it can also be really joyful as well. You asked me about my journey, but I didn't really know where to start. I was born in Bendigo, so I'm a little country girl at heart. Family all throughout the northeast on my mum's side, and dad was a Kiwi, so I'm half Kiwi, which is fun. Grew up in a house with a really strong sense of social justice, lots of volunteer activities, lots of my grandma telling me, you really should go out and do what you want to do. She'd grown up on a dairy farm and was called George until she was 12. She was milking the cows just like all the boys were. And she never let me sort of stand down from my dreams, just always said, put yourself forward. And, I grew up in this incredible household with feminist women all around me. And I think that was the foundation for my journey, is social justice and feminism. Had some really incredible experiences when I was 15. I lived in Italy on student exchange. That was quite a seminal moment in my life. and then went on and studied at Melbourne Uni and did political science, criminology, spent some time interning over in the US House of Representatives, which is again kind of a moment, right? And then, yeah, thought, politics is not for me. It's so combative. It's ugly. I don't want to be part of that. Like, it's mean. I don't want to play that. I don't want to play games. I want to get work done. So
Mm.
then I kind of went on this really long journey of working with. My first job was in the Victorian government, working with people who'd survived the Black Saturday bushfires, which was look really catastrophic, but an incredible opportunity to learn about post traumatic growth, which was something that has really infused the way that I look at things and the opportunities that can come from incredible grief. What can be rebuilt in communities afterwards. I've had some other really incredible roles working with women in prison and the legal system, and I'm now working in Aboriginal health, looking at truth and treaty in Victoria. So yeah, it's been quite the journey, and council was part of that as well. I'm happy to sort of talk to you more about that a bit later, but that's sort of a bit of a quick snapshot of life to now.
Oh, and do you know what? This makes sense now. When other people, like, as I said, I'm not someone that would like to be in the public light like you are. That would be my worst nightmare. So when I see you fronting up, but now I get just from that tiny snippet why for you it was very natural and very normal. You're doing something that lit you from within. It was a purpose that was really important. So being able to front up, and as you say, you enjoy being around people and supporting community. So it's almost like you get that missing link, don't you? And you're like, that's why something else that, like I said, for me, the courage it would take to do a role like that would be off the planet. Yet for you,
Yes.
it was so normal.
Well, it's also that it's not about me, right? Like I always found it really fascinating when people would think because you are the front person that it is about you. But I actually really saw myself as a representative, as someone who was there to actually do a very important job, which was make sure I communicated the needs of others. That's how I really saw the mayoralty. I saw that role, even as a councillor, that my role was not about me, but about making sure that everyone felt heard. And so sometimes when I was speaking, it wasn't about me. It was about what I'd heard. It was about other people's experiences. And that was the pressure I felt, was to make sure I communicated that carefully, with nuance and with enough, I guess, compassion that people felt heard in their story being told. And that was really important to me as mayor.
And that's so interesting because as a speaker, I found that my speaking got better when I stopped making the focus about me. So even though some of the stories I share will be my personal stories,
Yeah,
I'm not sharing it to say, oh, look at me, look how good I am.
exactly.
I'm sharing it because if I can do that and that can help someone else, then there's
100%.
benefit in doing it. So I feel like that public part of the role, when that purpose is bigger, it'll
Yes.
that and the courage comes through. It's so much easier to get past any of the fears that you might have had. So, Jenna, when is a moment, and I'm sure there's going to be heaps of them, but when is a moment that you can recall where you had to really reach in and find some courage? Don't care how young you were, whether it was yesterday, whether it was when you were a little girl, but when was one moment that you can share and sort of kick us off and we'll follow the path after that?
It's funny because when you asked me that question when we just joined and said that was one of the questions you might ask, my gut told me something, and I often think when your body sort of shows up, that's the path you follow. Because you're right, there are so many moments in life that I can point to that say were really courageous moments. Some that I'd even reframe. I was talking to someone last night about that experience of me going on exchange at 15. This was pre-internet, and I think back in 1998, my mum
For
was very
anyone who doesn't
courageous.
realise there was a time pre-internet.
Yeah, right. There was no email, there was no mobile phones. It was like a call and letters that we used to write. But that story is actually about the courage of my mum to
Mm.
see that I needed that experience and was ready and brave enough to do it on my own. But for her to have the courage to send her daughter to another family on the other side of the world. Um, but when you asked me that question before, it was really interesting. Something I hadn't really thought about for a while came up, and that was yeah, a time that was pretty hard for me actually. So it was interesting that it kind of popped up in my mind.
Mm.
But back in 2017, I decided to go hiking in Nepal, and I was on the Annapurna Trail. And it was an incredible experience. I built some incredible friendships, and about a week in, got really violently ill to the point where I nearly got pulled off the hike. I had a stomach infection. I couldn't really walk. I was so determined to finish the walk. I just couldn't really think. After 2 days, they were like, "Look, you're too sick. We're gonna have to pull you off." And magically, that day, I pulled through. And I think it was just the power of my mind saying, "No, you're not pulling me off. I'm here." And that was really hard. I had to really dig deep on that one to find the courage and the strength to keep going, because part of me did just want to give up. But I kept going, and it was interesting because a day or so later, there was quite a traumatic event up in the mountains, and one of the young women that we were hiking with suffered from pretty significant altitude sickness, and we had to give her CPR for about 90 minutes, and unfortunately, she died. Yeah, it was really it was a very tragic moment. Her partner was there with her. There just wasn't the facilities. We were at high altitude at this point, and yeah, she didn't make it, and it was really hard to know that we tried really hard to save her life and gave her everything that we could, which is what I would want in that moment. But she yeah, sadly didn't make it and passed away. And I finished the hike, and it was, really mixed emotions of sort of having been so physically sick and then having this extremely traumatic thing happen for us as a group, and thinking about that young girl and her family, and, her partner and what that meant. And I got off the mountain, and I got a call from my brother to say that my dad had died. And
Oh, Jenna.
yeah, just these moments, right? And I just thought, I was so shocked that I didn't react. I just said, "Okay, thank you. Are you okay?" Um, I'll start to make arrangements to fly home. I couldn't get home straight away, which was really tricky. It took a few days to sort of, get flights and things like that. Um, but that was a time, I think, where I really felt completely overwhelmed. There's been other points in my life where I've made courageous decisions that have felt strong and empowered, but that was definitely a time in my life where I thought that's like not rock bottom, because there's definitely been other life experiences. And look, in comparison, I think there's people who've experienced a lot worse. But for me, that was a really challenging time to really just in a short period of time sort of contemplate and really grapple with what it all meant. And I think for me, the courage showed up in the journey of grief afterwards. And it's where I dug right back into that post traumatic growth story that I started to learn about when I was working with Black Saturday survivors. I felt so grateful that I was actually given tools back in 2009 to understand and expect what was going to happen, which was that for a lot of people, you get this kind of post grief energy. You're action focused, and you're doing things, and then there's this kind of 6 month mark where you fall over. And I mean, look, everyone's grief journey is different, but the courage showed up in letting that process just be what it needed to be, to sit with I'm okay with big angry feelings some days, or big teary feelings another day, to sit with that uncertainty and vulnerability, but also to have the courage to say, not today. Like, I'm sad about my dad passing away, but I don't have the headspace, the strength to deal with it. So I'm going to deal with that tomorrow, and just put it kind of in a little box for another day to kind of pull out, look at, and work through. So yeah, it was funny when you asked that question. That was what was in my heart, in the response that I wanted to share.
And I find this really interesting too, that the woman that actually, her episode went live last night, and she's got a whole lot of stuff, again, like you, where if you would look at that being a courageous moment, plenty of things she could have shared. She shared when she went on the Inca Trail in Peru and got really sick and didn't think she was going to be able to do it. It's so interesting. She went
Wow.
live last night, and I'm having this conversation with you. She also made the comment that was something that she didn't think we'd be talking about, right? And
Really
yet
interesting.
yeah, and she thought it was altitude sickness too, but they don't know what it was. But
Oh
there was
gosh.
so and I guess not only were you feeling sick and didn't think you'd make it, having to get through that, then losing one of the other walkers and coming back and losing your dad. What were some of the other tools that you learned, or what you were able to tap into, besides just being able to sit in the moment, and also like today I can't deal with it today, and allowing yourself that kind of grace? What other things do you think you'd learnt to date that, say, helped you get through that period? Because even when you were sharing that with me, I had all the feels going on and it was like, "Oh my god." And you can even share it in a way that's so compassionate, but we can still feel it. So what else
Yeah.
helped you through that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I've been really grateful for over my journey in life, and things like my yoga practice have really strengthened who I am. That idea of non judgment and being able to look at things and perhaps just gently assess them, to also not question or to have acceptance. I think I spent a lot of my life before I started my yoga practice really rallying against things and sort of railing against this idea of, what needed to happen in the social justice space. But there's this idea around just sitting with and accepting the feelings that are there and knowing that things take time, I think is really important. We don't talk enough about grief in the Western world. We don't have the mechanisms to deal with it. In Italy, for example, when I had a friend who passed away when she was 16, and what I loved was that there were just these regular points of where, a month after her passing, we all came together. 6 months after her, there was all of these kind of processes, and it was, I guess, through the Catholic Church for that instance in Italy, that people had these mechanisms to process their grief. But we don't really have a lot of that here. You get 3 days of leave, and then you're sort of expected to just
Yeah.
snap back to normal. And I think I was really grateful that I knew that it's a new normal. That's what a lot of bushfire survivors talk to me about. I worked with a lot of families who lost family members in the fires and went through the journey of understanding what that meant for them over about 2 years before I eventually needed to take a break from that role. So I sort of knew what was on the path for me: the confusion, the anger, the multitude of feelings. Some friends just completely dropping off because I didn't understand what you were going through and couldn't be there for you. Other friendships really strengthening. I think it was the knowing, that it was not unknown to me what I was going to experience that really, really helped. But also that idea that, if people who talk to me about losing their children in the fires could come out the other side and have something to share that was positive and that helped them grow, that recognized that grief is an unspeakable, awful thing, but that it doesn't mean that you can never experience joy or love again. And I think knowing that from these people who'd lived through some really unspeakable experiences of losing family members gave me the strength to go forward as well, and to think, well, how can I grow and learn from this experience, and what is it that will be the opportunity in really processing the loss of my dad and that experience of not being able to save someone's life. It really hit me hard, like when you're that kind of person, right, who thinks I can change the world, and I can do it, and it's just a matter of how hard I try. And there's been a few experiences in my more adult life that have taught me that sometimes no matter how hard you try, you can't achieve what you want, but you have to accept that you've given it a go and that not trying would be worse. So I think that was a really important experience to have as well.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And what I'm really, appreciating about this is that that whole experience of you doing all that work, after people had really suffered from the bushfires, that everything they were able to share then helped you on your journey later on when you had to go through your own
Yeah,
challenges and your
that's
own
right.
grief. And it's so interesting, isn't it? And that's why I'm probably like you. I'm a really big advocate for supporting people sharing their stories. And
Yes.
sometimes it is their yucky stories because in that they've maybe been through it and come out on the other end. But someone else who's only at the start of that journey, they hear it and it gives them more of that. It's okay to feel like this. It's okay
Validates so
when you
much, right?
oh, totally. So
Yeah.
that's brutal. What is also really interesting, you mentioned a yoga practice.
Yeah.
When did you take that up and why did you?
Well, it was 2014, and it was quite funny. I joined a studio in South Melbourne. I sort of walked in and was like, right, I'm going to really focus on my yoga practice and not get too caught up in the social activities that ended up becoming, some of the great friends that I have at the moment came out of that time at that yoga studio. But it's funny because I'm a foster carer, and I think a lot about the experiences that we have as really young children and things that are really unconscious for us. My cousin and auntie used to teach yoga, and I remember back now to when I was very little, they used to do yoga nidra with me, which is now something that I do with my foster kids. And it's just a really interesting reflection that sometimes those things that are buried deep in the part of who we've become that we don't sort of necessarily recognize come to the fore when you're older. So it was really lovely to think about coming back to yoga from when I was really little.
Oh, that's so cool. So why did you do it then? Like, what happened in 2014? Because I'm assuming there's years
Mm.
from when you were doing it when you were a little girl to then. Why then? Why yoga then?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was anything. There must have been something calling me
Mm.
towards it. Um, yeah, but nothing specific happened in that particular time frame that made me think, oh no, this is the moment that I need to start. It was just I felt like it was the right time. I was also riding my bike around a lot, which was super fun. I used to work at an Aboriginal women's legal service in Abbotsford, and so I would ride from Abbotsford to South Melbourne and then back over to South Yarra. And I was really reflecting on those days because I had so much freedom in my life, and I'm actually car free at the moment. So I've been car free since the end of October. I gave my car to a family member who needed it, and whenever I need to borrow it for big trips, they will say, of course, take the car. But actually, I've really loved being back on my bike as a day to day mode of transport because I feel great. And the other day, I did get back in the car and I instantly snapped back into that. Where's the person not doing this? And where's their indicator? And I was like, oh, I noticed all these behaviors that when you're on your bike, you're just like, life is good. You're pedaling along. And even when it's raining, it's really hard to feel like having a bad day on a bike. I don't know. There's just something about it that feels free.
Oh, I love it. And if you think back to when you're a little kid, what are some of the freest moments? Is when you're on your bike and
Reading
racing
around.
around the street. But as a great, that's interesting. And so where are you? Okay, you're also a foster parent. Oh
Logistics.
my God, I've got 1,000 questions going
Okay.
through my mind. So you're a foster parent, but you've got probably a busy schedule because I know you work as well. But
Yeah.
you've got no car. What about even going to the supermarket?
Yeah, well, actually, supermarket's easy. There's an amazing woman called Emmy. She runs her own company called Dutch Cargo Cycles, and they've got these amazing bikes where you can either get this big carriage at the front or a seat at the back. I've actually just got my normal e-bike, and it has a little carriage that I can attach to it, and I can fit two kids in it. And so my regular foster placements at the moment are two little kids who are 4 and 5, and they fit easily into that, and then teenagers. And it's been interesting because over summer I had a teenager, or sorry, over December, had a teenager staying with me for a month. And yeah, she and I just hooned around on our bikes, and it was really therapeutic for her, I think, to, we weren't stuck in a car, stuck in traffic. We were riding up and down Beach Road, and one night we went to Mordialloc for dinner, and then she's like, "Hey, can we go to the beach and watch the sunset?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like why not?" We pulled up, we had pole position because you just pull up your bike, right? You don't need to worry about parking. And
Oh,
then we went for a quick swim and then rode home covered in sand because we didn't have towels with us. We just went for a swim in our clothes, and yeah, it is good. Kids have really enjoyed jumping on the spare bike, although they do complain it's not an e-bike and I get an e-bike. But I feel like as the older person, I can pull rank around e-bikes.
this is just beautiful. Oh my goodness, I can just imagine you driving it. I love though that you've got a basket and you can put the kids in.
Yeah, it's super
Well,
cool.
not
It's
some
all
milk for the
sleeved
bread.
and stuff. Like, yeah, because it was really interesting. I caught up with some women recently at a Pathways to Politics. I had the 10-year anniversary of that program at Government House recently, and there were two women who we'd all parked our bikes together. And as we were walking out, one of them was saying that she rode her bike. I mean, look, admittedly, she does live in the north side of the city, which is where all the cool bike riders are. The south side, I think people are still like, why is that lady wearing lipstick on a bike? It's like, they sort of watched me ride past a little confused. Like I'm in my work gear and dressed up. And they're sort of like, we don't really understand this. But on the north side, this friend of mine, she said that she was 38 weeks pregnant and still hooning around on her bike. And the other one was like, yeah, basically once her baby was old enough to sit up, she had a little seat put on the back of her bike, and even came down to Warragul for a women's conference. She was the mayor of Darebin, Suzanne Newton, a few years ago, and yet she caught the V line down and then like pedaled furiously from the station in Warragul to the conference centre with her little like 8-month-old baby on the back. And just women
That's huge.
inspiring you, right?
Yeah. But isn't it funny that sometimes it can be something as simple as a woman doing all of this on a bike that can be the inspiration? And even though
Yes.
you might not, or someone listening might not necessarily have the desire to ride a bike, it's like, well, if she can do that, if she can go car free or she can be pregnant and riding a bike, what could I do? So
Yeah, that's right.
even telling these little stories can just be that something for someone else to go and do whatever it is that they need to do. So I want to know why foster parenting, why are you doing that? But before we do, I'm so curious because you seem to have done like so many things. When you were a little girl growing up, what did
Yeah.
you think you were going to do or be?
Well, when I was really little, I was a BMX bandit and I don't think I wore shoes very much. Um, but funnily enough, but I really wanted to be a marine biologist because I loved dolphins. And one of the interesting things I got to do on my podcast was interview Dr. Kate Robb, who is this amazing, amazing scientist who's discovered that in Victoria we have a unique dolphin species that's not found anywhere else in the world. So shout out to Marine Mammal Foundation and Dr. Kate because that's incredible, right? It's only in Gippsland Lakes and Port Phillip Bay. Nowhere else in the world is this dolphin found. And she only
Why?
discovered it back in 2010. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember. There's a podcast on it.
Go and listen to the podcast. We'll put it in the show notes. Yep.
Um, yeah, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I went through a period where I really wanted to go into theatre. Like, I think every young girl has that kind of like 10-year-old vibe of like, I want to sing and dance for the rest of my life. But it was when I was 15 and I went to Italy, and it was quite a shock to leave. I'd left Bendigo when I was about 9 and moved down to Melbourne to live with my grandma and my mum and my brother after my parents separated. And so I left suburban Melbourne behind when I was 15 and flew to Naples. Like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but like, the first thing I saw from like leaving the airport, and I remember my brain kind of catching up after my mouth, and I was like, why is that lady on the side of the road just in her undies? Like, isn't she cold? And then my brain was like, oh, this is a place where sex workers are out on the street in the cold in the middle of winter. There was a house just down the road from me that had, I think at one point, about 20 people from North Africa living in it. It was completely dilapidated. It was about 200 years past its use by date. I don't think it had running water. And this town that I was in was really rough. Really, that was just where the placement was, where the family offered their home. And I got to really see those experiences of people who were seeking asylum. Obviously, the issue throughout Europe has, in the last 20 years, only gotten much worse. But I came home from that experience thinking, oh, I don't want to do anything else other than be involved in making sure people have the full expression of their rights. Like, nothing else was important after that experience, because I just thought, how can some people live with such wealth and such incredible privilege, and others, just by the virtue of where they're born, have to suffer so much just for some of the basic things that we all deserve, just like basic education, basic housing. That was a definite turning point in my life.
And there usually, I mean, not always, but there often is something that's happened or that took place or that you saw or witnessed or whatever that does go, oh, okay, yeah, that there's something going on inside me. How long were you in Italy for?
A year.
You're there for a year and you're 15, and you said it was the courage of your mum that sent you. Did you want to go?
I wanted to go from when I was 12. I was just, I don't know, obsessed with this idea of, my grandma was a big traveler. We used to call her Cora the Explorer.
Cora,
And
I love it.
mum wasn't like that, but grandma was. And I still have itchy feet to see the world. People keep asking me, oh, is that going to be your last big trip? And I just always think, have you met me? Like, there is something about, and it took me a really long time to realize that part of what I loved about travel wasn't necessarily just exclusive to being overseas. You can bring that mentality back home with you. It just can be a bit harder because in our day-to-day life, and particularly Melbourne, I found, after experiencing, I guess, other communities abroad, because I've lived overseas a couple of other times, like in Bangkok for a year working with the UN and meeting people, like, as a melting pot of people from all over the world. We are a little bit constrained here. Like, I think we're getting better at being more flexible and open to everyone living different lifestyles. But I think growing up, there was a definite sense that this is how you do things, and this is what you should look like, and this is what your trajectory looks like. And the thing that I love about travel is that it's about opening your mind to possibilities. And I used to love seeing how other people lived. I used
Mm.
to really love staying with people and being like, oh, that's, yeah, is that how you do things? And yeah, I just love getting to know other people. I think it comes back to what you and I both love.
Mm. And there's something beautiful in that too, isn't there? That just because this is the way that you've always done it, or that you were brought up, or the society, or the culture, or whatever, this is not how everyone else does
That's
it.
right.
And what's right and what's wrong? There is none, right? And I
It's so
find that
true.
part of it, that part for me as I've got older, and like you, I lived overseas and did all of that.
I
That was to
remember.
me, like even recently, I was just out for dinner with my mum, and we're sitting having dinner, and there's a couple of kids and a mum standing outside the restaurant, and they're about to walk in, and they all had bare feet. And my mum was like, "Oh, they can't come in. They've got bare feet." And I turned around. I love my mum so much, but I said, "Why not?" Because this is our culture and our society that we say, it's
Yeah.
rude to walk into a restaurant with bare feet. And mum was saying, but, when they go home tonight, their sheets will get dirty. And I'm like, and so
Yes.
what? Yeah, I know, but that's, it's so interesting, that even things as simple as that, because this is just the way we've done things and the way we know, we don't realize that other people don't do that. And they think maybe some of our things are a bit, but that's what I guess travel partly can bring to your table. So why did you get into foster caring, and how long ago did you?
Yeah, I'll tell you about that journey in a second. I think one thing I really wanted to just highlight in our
Mm,
conversation here was now more than ever, we need pluralistic and nuanced and um, ability to understand complexity. What I feel at the moment is happening in the world is this sense of polarization. And when you talked about that right and wrong, there's this real sense of you're either right or you're wrong. And if you're on my side, you're on my side. If you're not, you're wrong.
mm,
And one of the things that I worry about as a community is that we're losing that ability to hold
mm,
complexity and hold diversity and difference,
yeah.
right? That we don't all have to be the same, that we can choose different paths, but still live cohesively and collaboratively together as a community. So yeah, I guess I
Mm,
really wanted to sort of just pose that there for people to think more about, like, how in our everyday life can we be inclusive? And one of the things that I tried really hard as an independent counselor was to think about, what are the ways that I can bring people along on the journey? And I was very lucky. Back in 2015, I did this training course called Deep Democracy. And it was a model that came out of South Africa post apartheid about how this, community would start to heal some of the wounds from apartheid, which are obviously immense and ongoing, and structural and colonial racism are real embedded things and difficult. But they did have some really good models. And it was things like, when you're arguing with someone, you have to pretend you're two colors, and then you have to look for your color in what they're saying and their color in what you're saying, and try and find a way of relating to what they're doing. Another example is, if a vote is taken in deep democracy, it's not 51%. It's, you get to 51%, it's one, but then you have to turn to the 49, or and say to the group that lost, what would it take for you to come along with us and say yes to this? What do we need to amend to make sure that you feel comfortable with this, to the point where you maybe get to a more of a consensus of 70 to 80% of people? Obviously, you can't please everyone, but I just think these are things we're losing at the moment. And I really just wanted to create a bit of space for that right now. Yeah.
But it's such an interesting point, though, because you're so right. And I mean, this is everywhere. This is in relationships. This is in
Yeah.
workplaces. The minute someone else has a different opinion,
Mm.
it's like, well, that's them and this is me. It's like, yeah, but and I love when someone's got a different opinion. I love just finding out why. Where's that
Yes.
coming from? I might
Yeah.
not agree with them. I don't have to agree with them. And politics is a really good one. But even football teams, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, just because it's different, but understanding just where they're coming from, I find that such a beautiful thing to be able to do. And it takes away that polarization that, it doesn't have to be black or white. There can be a
Exactly right.
blend of both, and being able to accept it. So, yeah. And I'm guessing you would have seen a lot of this in politics. Um,
Well,
you know,
disturbingly, I've seen these trends really become quite embedded in our politics
yeah.
lately. And I was really sad about the outcome of the 2024 elections, because I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of the fear mongering and the kind of the us versus their mentality getting ahead, because I think people are really struggling with a lot in their lives at the moment. And sometimes when you're struggling, you don't have a lot of space for really seeing others. And so I think it's just a good reminder that we are stronger together, and fearing the other is not helpful. Working together and being compassionate only makes things better for everyone, yourself included. So I'm
Mm,
sorry, I totally diverged, but you asked me about foster care. So
mm,
interesting journey there. Anyone who wants to chat with me about foster care is really welcome to reach out.
mm.
I started foster care because I wanted to end foster care.
How long
I
ago was this?
2017.
Okay.
So I did my training in 2016. I was working at the Aboriginal Women's Legal Service at the time, and I have a very clear memory of coming in just after Christmas, and the senior lawyer was really distressed, and I, really, really upset. And I said, "Look, how are you? Can I help? And what's happened?" And she said, you can't help because four of her clients had had their children removed over the Christmas period because of family violence." And I just thought, this is just not good enough, right? We have more children, more Aboriginal children now in out of home care than they were under the Stolen Generation policy. Removing children from their families does not fix the problem. And I said, there are many families that are struggling that if they just had a bit more support and a bit more, like primary intervention, early intervention into their experience of, what they were going through, maybe they'd be able to retain the care of their children.
Mm,
And so I reached out to an Aboriginal childcare, it's called VACA, the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency, and went through training with them and became a foster carer with the aim of working with Aboriginal women before their kids were removed. And I did that for about 2.5 years. I worked with a young mum. She was 27, had 3 kids, had grown up in foster care herself, had experienced family violence and ongoing family violence, but was an amazing mum. Just needed, she's from interstate, didn't have any family here other than the family of the person who was perpetrating family violence, so couldn't really get a lot of help there. And so my role was to be more like an auntie, to be there, um, pick the kids up every third weekend. There was no workers involved. They'd come and stay. They had that support network. She had a weekend off just to take some time out. And I just think these are the ways in which we can actually make a difference. It was a shame that after 2.5 years, the funding was reduced. And so the frequency of the respite weekends was extended out to about 5 weeks. And that was just not enough for her to keep going. The kids ended up in my care full time shortly after that decision was made, for about 15 or 16 months, quite unexpectedly. She became a bit unwell, I think, with the news that she wasn't going to have that support and a couple of other things going on. But what it meant was that instead of going into the foster care system, these 3 kids lived with me. And that was probably another time I had to really dig deep to find courage. It was quite the adjustment going from being just, a single happy person to having 3 kids all at once. And then, 4 or 5 months later, suddenly ending up in lockdown. Yeah, quite a wild journey, but what it meant was that they were with me and then transitioned back to the care of their mum. I had took a year off foster care because I was pretty burnt out after that experience, but decided to come back in because I thought perhaps I can advocate best from the inside. So I've been doing a lot of advocacy. There's a few media articles that I've contributed to, because what I'm trying to get out there is that message that we need to love all kids with the same respect and dignity that they deserve. Like, if you have children yourself, really think about what are the ways you can contribute to making sure all kids are safe.
mm,
And that it's not this paternalistic view of foster care. We're not saving these children and they're becoming our children. It's this idea of creating a safe space to help support the family go on their journey of healing. Like, a lot of people need mental health or AOD, like alcohol and other drug support and rehabilitation. And then they can be the amazing parents they're always meant to be. But I think if we continue looking at foster care as this kind of outsourcing of problems,
mm,
it is just going to continue to be a cycle, because kids, that system is really broken. Kids come into my care, they've been bumped around placements, and, some of them end up in residential care at really young ages.
mm.
I had these 2 girls turn up for a weekend once, and they were 9 and 10, and they were in residential care and were coming to me for a weekend of respite. And I said, absolutely not. These girls are not leaving my home until another placement is found. Like I'm not, I wasn't able to do full-time care at that time because I was working the 2 jobs with council and my full-time role. It was about 80 hours a week. So it was a bit tough to add kids into the mix as well. But, they stayed for a month and then a foster family was found for them. And that family has been ongoing now. It's been 2 years that they've been with that family. So, there's a lot of positives, and I really wouldn't discourage anyone from thinking about foster care, but there is a broader conversation for us as a community to talk about foster care and why we're failing these kids and why, people are complaining about these issues of youth justice, and I understand, but you've got to ask that question why, the one you talked about before, that question of why are these kids behaving that way? Like kids who've got opportunity and who feel there's hope in front of them, who have a pathway to the future they want, are not going to be behaving really badly. They're not going to jeopardize that. Kids who've got nothing in front of them, what have they got to lose? Things that they want are not available to them, right? And this increasing kind of entrenchment of, anyway, I'm going on, sorry, but yeah, a bit passionate.
No. But what I'm finding so fascinating here as well is that, yes, say from the work that you've done, you see a system, you see how it works, you see what doesn't work. But you weren't just observing from the outside, you got inside. You saw firsthand and you took on kids. I mean, fruit to take on 3 kids when you've been single in one hit, like, oh my goodness, that would be the next level. But it gives you that qualification to then say, I've seen it from the inside because I've sat in the shoes, I've walked in the shoes, I've been one of the carers. I've seen the disruption to the children's lives. We've got to do more for it. So I'm not surprised that you just get all in and give things your all. Jenna, we need like 10 hours to have this conversation.
It's time already.
Oh, not quite yet. I want to milk every last minute I've got, knowing
Okay.
you've got other commitments as well. So what on the back of all of this, and you're still obviously caring for kids, but what's one of the next things that you've got to really reach in and find some courage for?
Yeah, a big one, and it's one that has been a journey for about the last 2 years, really actively, but probably since about 2017. When I turned 35, a really close friend of mine pulled me aside, and it was like a birthday present, although she did give me a beautiful perfume that I've still got. And she said to me, I wish someone had done this for me. I feel sad when I think about it. But she said, no one tells women that your journey of fertility is really finite, right? And not all women at 35, but many women at 35 are really rapidly approaching a point of their fertility hitting a bit of a wall or falling off a cliff, as other people have kind of described it. And she talked me through all the science, because she's a scientist, right? That's her job. And laid it all out, all the facts. And I was like, whoa. I'd always been told I could kind of like have it all. Women of this generation, we're feminists, we're fierce, and we're going to go get our education and get our career, and then we're going to have babies. It's like, yeah, I got it all. No, that's not how our bodies are made. I rapidly discovered after a week later going and doing a blood test and having a really bad result where it was like, yeah, your fertility is like, I think it's called an AMH test, an anti-Malarian hormone test, if anyone's interested in doing it. It's not 100% accurate, but it gives a sense of where your fertility is at. And I scored a 7, and I should have been at least a 20 at that age. So really quickly, without thinking too much about it, I borrowed 30 grand from the bank and went and froze my eggs.
Oh, wow.
And that was that was back a while ago. Like, you're going to need a whole nother hour with me talking about the exploitative pricing of the IVF industry, which is why I was so thrilled under Gabby Williams and the state government. They've kind of launched that public IVF fund, which I haven't used because I've already been going through a doctor that I really have had a lot of success with, and just keep borrowing that money. But it is really awful, and we don't talk enough about it, and we don't talk enough about the fact that women and their partners are going through this really challenging journey that is financially, emotionally, physically so depleting. Like, I still can't really find the words to talk about it, to explain it. Like, I wish I could come up with some pithy way of being like, this is how I explain it, but it's so comprehensive, this experience of going through IVF. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, is I guess how I would put it. Like, You wouldn't. You wouldn't, even on someone you really disliked, you'd be like, I just really hope that is never where you end up. And there's some very brave women. You know, there was an article last week about a woman who'd had stillbirths, she'd had multiple rounds, she'd had surgeries, and she'd stuck it out and had 2 kids. And I just thought, I've been through like this much of that journey, and I don't know how she found the courage to keep going, because it is like, I was definitely getting to the point last year where I thought, I think I'm ready to give up. So yeah, sort of backtracking, 2017, 2018, froze my eggs. I was 35, went, yep, going to put it there. And, you know, I'm going to meet someone. It's going to be amazing. Didn't, became a full-time carer, then COVID hit, and then I became a counsellor. I was working 80 hours a week, and a relationship just wasn't the priority focus for me. And it was hard. I think post-COVID, there's been a lot of women experiencing that. And then I turned 40 2 years ago and went, oh, I'm like really in trouble. Like, if I don't kind of get my skates on here, this is it. And I still had this like real sense of like, ah, is this the right thing? You know, should I become a mother? Like, should I even try? Or, like, it's a big thing financially as a single person to do that. It's a lot to go through. And I eventually decided that I'd really regret not giving it a go. And that I love being a foster carer, and that I could see myself nurturing a child in my life. And so started that journey and spent 2 years trying. And I think there's a lot to be said about working a lot and cortisol. And I was very lucky. My counsel term was like, I had this amazing counsellor team around me. It was positive, it was collaborative, it was non-political. We had this group of 7 or 8 people made up of Liberal, Labor and independents, kind of all just making good decisions together, not being nasty, not attacking one another. There's a lot of that happening at the moment in this current council term. It makes me really ill, but so grateful that my experience of council was this beautiful thing. But even with that, I think my body was like, no, like you I could never hold a pregnancy. My body was just kept kind of letting it go. And I lost the election. And the day after, I got my period. And that's the day you have to start your IVF injections. And I rang the nurses and they said, look, it's November, early November, but there's a Christmas break. So you either start today, I was pretty low, I was feeling pretty bad, or wait until next year. And I remember thinking, oh, fine, like whatever, this is it. There's no money left. Like after this, like whatever, who cares? I'd lost the whole, I'm going to manifest and be positive. It's just fine. Yeah, what else could go wrong? But it didn't go wrong. And I'm 16 weeks pregnant.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, still really grappling
Oh
with the
my God.
fear
I
around.
this. So anyone listening, I'm finding out this right now too.
Yeah, it is news. I haven't
Oh
I
my
haven't
God.
I haven't made big announcements yet. It's just, it felt too soon and too early, but I'm starting to feel so much more confident now that this is it, that she's coming as a little girl. And that I can start to really believe in it, because there's been a lot of loss before this, and I didn't want to. I got sick and tired of having to tell people it didn't work, and so there's a lot of fear involved, and I'm still working through that and what that means, and trying to just kind of drop the anxiety, because I know that isn't good, but it's there. I'm not going to deny it. Like, it's a big part of my experience of being pregnant at the moment, is this constant fear that I'm going to wake up one day and it's going to be like, sorry, but actually it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, there's a lot of courage required every day to try and just really believe. And also, friends of mine who've gone through IVF have all said what you should try and do is not worry about what's coming tomorrow, but celebrate what happens today. Because today I'm pregnant. I might not be tomorrow or next week, but today I am, and this is the furthest I've ever gotten. And I should try and enjoy that experience for what it is today.
Oh, Jenna, absolutely. And, pregnancy is never that much fun, but it is fun because it's
Also
not
that.
the place you've ever been. You've never been 16 weeks pregnant before. You are, I agree. And, oh, wow, beautiful. And I so look forward to following your journey.
Thanks.
Hopefully it is that we can get to meet your daughter and see what happens from there. Oh, my God. And even the courage to share this, because obviously it's a public forum. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I did not expect
I
that.
want other women to know, right, that this
Oh,
IVF journey, like,
yep.
it's brutal. It It really is so unforgiving. It takes so much from you. But, I guess as the women who've reached the other side, and hopefully that will be me, I want to share that message of hope and to hang in there because I nearly gave up. I was like, this is it. I'm so done.
I'm
I can't do
42.
this anymore. Yeah.
You're 42. So you've still got your chance.
Yeah.
You're 16 weeks pregnant and everything crossed. That it turns out the way that is
Thank
right
you.
for you. So, oh wow. Jenna, I'm conscious you've got other commitments right
Yeah. Thank
right
you.
this minute.
Yeah.
I'll put in the show notes if anyone does want to follow you. Obviously, you're all over Instagram
Yeah, and
and
reach out if you want to chat about IVF
yeah.
journeys. Like if you're on the verge of that or going through it and just need someone to talk to, or you want to talk about foster care, these are things I really care about.
Oh my God, there's everything you could talk to you about. Like, just so you're just going to have to come back. Like, seriously, we've got too many things to leave it at this. Jenna Davey Burns, roller skater, chocolate lover, pregnant woman. Here's to you and your courage. Wow. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's just been so lovely. I really appreciate you having me on.